let's have a talk about what's in it for you guys as the sellers, or what's in it for us, because we're all in there selling. So UC does a number of things for sellers. So the first one is it's a hot topic for your customers. And as we saw there, and as we'll talk a little bit more about why it's so important to customers. Secondly, UCaaS conversations are consultative conversations. So if you're having a conversation about solving these problems, you're elevating yourself out of a conversation about licensing or who has the cheapest bill. UCaaS makes your customers stickier and happier. And that's really powerful as a customer or as a seller. If I can sell something and in that process make my customer stickier and happier, then that's a triple win for me. And we'll talk about why that is. And then really importantly for everyone on the call, UCaaS helps us deliver monthly recurring revenue. And more importantly, it delivers more profitable and it pulls us out of the weeds where we're adding value and it's hard to compare to just a straight old phone bill comparison. And we'll talk about that in a minute. So let's go through these one at a time. Why is UCaaS a hot topic for customers? Well, as we just saw there about what's happening out around the world is customers are seeing now that their workforce is more displaced and it's more mobile, it's more remote. And that causes issues for them. We're seeing more and more meetings that are going online, something like this, the birth of the 15-minute meeting. We're seeing that customer experience is linked to staff or to staff experience. And what I mean there is that as we get displaced, if your staff are feeling siloed and not really feeling part of a team, probably your customers are as well if they're having trouble communicating and getting hold of people. And then finally, we're seeing a wave of millennials are coming through who understand what technology is there and they want to have these tools. And then I'll bring you in now, mate. What are you seeing with your customers around this? I mean, are you seeing them knowing these problems that they're having? What happened around COVID for you guys, and what did you do to try and solve some of these problems?
We were a little bit lucky where I am up north in Townsville. We didn't really have a massive COVID impact, but we did have the initial scare, and it scattered our customers away from the workplace, the centralized workplace, to working from home. It definitely became the topic of conversation. How do we operate our business from home? And the initial place that people went were apps like Teams and Zoom, and for all their collaboration and their videos, their content sharing, all of that sort of stuff. So having a UCaaS product that unified all of that was a really, really important tool to have it under our belt. And we've also got up here once a year, lately at least, we get the cyclone season come by.
Yes.
And the big topic for my customers is, these are non-profit organizations, some of them who help people who are in need or disabled people, that sort of thing. So for them, when a disaster strikes, that is a critical time when they need to be available, but it's also a time when they may not be able to get to the office. So having that option for mobility and remote work was really, really important for them as well.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. I was involved in with a cyclone up the Whitsundays there, and everyone thinks about data as being that business continuity component, but most businesses, if you ask them, you can either have voice or data. They'll take voice. Like that's a lifeblood for their business. So look at these other areas as well. We see that, and these are good stats to be able to use. 65% of the workplace is now distributed and mobile compared to where it used to be. 63% of professionals are spending at least 2 hours a day. I would very happily take 2 hours a day on online meetings. There's a fair few more of them. And there's a big one as well around recruitment. So 75% of the workforce will be millennial by 2025. And the way that millennials are consuming technology is very different. And we've seen some surveys that have came out around, ASEAN did a survey recently that said employees, 46% of them would be willing to move jobs for a work from home or a flexible working environment. And in millennials, that was over 50%. And so in a tight working environment, being able to make sure you're offering these type of flexible solutions, but while in the meantime making sure that the staff are doing the right thing is really critical. So then the next one we talk about is UCAS conversations are consultative conversations. And so this is some surveys that was done of end customers to find out what was keeping them up at night. And what's really good about this type of stuff is that if you phrase this as a question, you're very much talking about the things that are on their mind and then really bringing into solution style selling. So, one of the areas of concern about is low employee productivity and engagement. So a good way to ask that is turn around and go, did you see a drop down in productivity over COVID? Are you concerned about employee disconnection if they're working from home? These are good questions to ask your partners or your end customers, again, leading into, that segmentation of silos between sales and marketing and operations. The more we spread out as businesses, then the risk is the more we become siloed in how we look. So again, these three, if we're talking to our end customers and we say, are you worried about silos within your business and a lack of collaboration if the staff are working from home or remotely? These are the type of things that will then lead forward into a UCAS conversation about how you solve these problems. Then when we look on the other side around customer satisfaction, there's a real concern around brand reputation and customer satisfaction through poor communication. Because what we saw was businesses very quickly pivoted to work remotely because of what was happening. But what we all thought was very soon would return to the office. And so there was a bit of piecemeal solutions around forwarding main numbers to mobiles. And what we're seeing now is that's delivering a really poor customer engagement and experience. And so with UC, we can talk about being able to deliver enterprise grade phone system features in a combined solution, via Teams or WebEx or whatever it is, no matter where their staff are. Dan, what did you see around this? What conversations are you having around UC to get out of the weeds of how much their phone bill is and start talking about, the benefits and the opportunity around UC?
I don't ask how much their current phone bill is. I think that's a trap because you're immediately framing your conversation as a selling conversation. And as you say, we want to be consultative. I think talking about productivity and engagement, all these points on here are really, really important, but also ask the customer, have they measured what that cost is? How is that impacting them? Because what you want to essentially do is, let's say, for argument's sake, the phone bill is about $500. What you want to do is add cost onto that. You want to find out from them all these pain points and what the cost is for that. And suddenly you go from a $500 phone bill to an $800 a month bleed or cost in total. And then the floor's open to you to provide a solution. And
that's a brilliant method, right? So it's, you can look at a phone bill and, as you said, $500 down. But if you ask a customer, like, what's a customer worth to you? What's your average spend? Oh, well, when we bring a guy in, they spend $2,000 with us on average. Well, what happens if that guy or girl gets lost in cold routing hell because you've all had to work from home for a particular reason, and they give up and go to your opposition who has got a decent UCAS solution?
Yeah, and you can run the numbers in front of them.
Phone bill.
Sorry, Peter. You can run the numbers in front of them. Ask them that question: what's a sale worth? Let's say it's a $2,000 sale. What's your close rate if it's 25%? And then how many calls do you think are getting lost per month? If it's 100, you've lost 25 calls at $2,000 each. Suddenly you're looking at, I've lost the math, 50 grand worth of sales if it's 25 calls, yeah. $2,000.
And that's powerful, isn't it?
Yeah. And I mean, the numbers are not likely to necessarily be that obviously large, but they don't need to be.
No, and then the flip side as well, right? Because there's two ends of that funnel. So there's customers they lose, but there's also the staff as well. So if you get into that displaced working environment and you've got less visibility of your staff, and a couple of them are, pardon the pun, phoning it in, then what's that productivity loss? How much are you charging? How much of that staff worth to you from an overall cost? And if it takes you a month to realize a couple of them are fading out, then that's a significant impact on the business as well.
Yep, definitely.
Yeah, so really, these are really good questions to be asking around, and we'll get into it a little bit later about some good qualifying questions to ask. But these conversations, because it's in the front of their mind, that no one's going to say to you, "Oh, thank goodness, Dan, you've turned up to talk about UCaaS," right? Like we're not going to say that. But when you ask these questions, what we find out is the problems that we're solving is the problems that they have. So the next one, which is UCaaS will make your customers stickier and happier. So you will deliver a better experience than those crusty telcos. That is not the most daftest statement I will make today, right? You guys are, as a small, organized or medium business who are focused on being a trusted advisor and providing multiple services, are going to do a better job than those bigger telcos. And so, automatically by having that, you're already giving them a better service. By managing their UC, you also have more control over potential issues. And there's nothing worse than as being a provider, you might be selling a Teams license and you're getting grief because of phones or for another reason, because they ring you first because you're the trusted advisor, and you're not taking a clip on that and you're still getting the grief. So by consolidating their needs, not only do they get a better experience, but you come out of that in a better light with them as well. And then this is one that I always really liked when I had my own business, which is the more agreements I have with a customer, particularly when they have different ending timeframes, then the stickier that customer is with me. Because if I or one of my staff then did something silly to annoy that partner, I had a chance to go back there and fix it up, because there was a lot of entanglement between the two businesses. And I'd further go and take a step as well, is because this is so front of mind for customers, because this is the problems that they have UC solves, then I'd argue that if you're not talking to your partner or customer about UC, someone will come along and try and solve these problems. And so it's not just about the revenue opportunities, but it's also about ring fencing your customers as well and making sure that you're protecting them from what's out there from the competition. Dan, what have you seen there around when you've brought those customers in, comparing it to that old, old traditional PABX and telcos? How has that flexibility allowed you to actually elevate your customer service levels with them?
Being able to, the second point in that list, being able to have control of the customer experience and provide a much higher level of support from a local perspective from our own support staff, that was a massive selling point. I don't know anybody who, I haven't come across anybody yet who's been happy with the either of the two main telco providers. And a big part of that is that they can't get the support they need. And for a little while there, we were a reseller for one of those telcos, and every customer we signed up essentially was handed over to them for support. But we were stuck in the middle because the customer signed up with us. But every time they had a support issue, it had to be rerouted through the provider. So that caused a lot of frustration for us and our customers. And so that is, one of the biggest points that we leverage, being able to have that local support, and then the onshore, level 2 support as well. And I totally agree with your point about having as many agreements in place as possible to keep customers sticky. Absolutely.
Yeah, brilliant. And then this final one really feeds back against what we're talking about telcos is, porting's hard, right? So bringing customers in is hard. Now we know that because we spend a ton of time and we've built technologies and we have a whole team to make sure that you guys don't feel that pain. But, telcos, I'd argue that, I think it's hard for a reason, right? They don't want people leaving. And so what we've done is really put a lot of time in making sure that when you bring a customer in, it's a smooth experience, But for all those reasons, they didn't want to move in the first place. Once you get them in and you're providing a far better customer service than they're getting, then you really protect not only the voice, but you're protecting your managed services agreements, your AV license agreements, your Teams licensing. It all comes in as part of that bundle. So yeah, it's a powerful environment where you can sell something to your current customer, so you don't have to find any more. You can, when you do that, they'll be happier and stickier in the process. That's really powerful. And then the one for sellers that we're all carrying numbers, we all have targets to hit, is UCaaS helps deliver monthly recurring revenue. And more importantly, it delivers it profitably, so you can get higher numbers on it, and it takes you out of the weeds. So you see conversations changes from being about saving money, as you said, Dan, to being about staff productivity, better customer experience, communications continuity. So everything that Dan said, which I love the fact that you're seeing that that continuity play has been really important. I think we're all sick of hearing about unprecedented times, right? Like
Yep.
Every 15 minutes there's an unprecedented event. Like the ocean was on fire a couple of weeks ago. That's not ideal. So continuity is really important to businesses. And we if you go back 2 years ago, that might have been a harder conversation. But after the disruption we're seeing and the constant change in working habits, people are very much willing to have that conversation. I think the reality is right now, the only constant we have is change. And so, Dan, you spoke about that just a couple of minutes ago, but I don't know if you got any more comments around how, if particularly if you're going into a place and they go, give me a quote on a phone system. I mean, if you go in with a UC solution that's, not everyone in the market's trying to do, and it needs a little bit of solution selling, how does that differentiate yourself, and how does that change how you're seen in that quote?
It's difficult to go in if the customer's presented you with or asked you, I need a price, just give me a price. You're already not in the right place. You're in a selling position, so you need to turn the conversation around or qualify the customer out, or you're wasting your time. And it really depends on the customer, but try to get them to talk about, why are you looking to change? What is it about your current system that has you looking? And that opens the door to them to start talking about those pain points. And then you can flip the conversation to productivity, customer experience, continuity, those points you got there. But if the customer's fixated on a price point, you don't really want to be in that opportunity, to be frank, or I don't.
No.
I've mentioned to you previously, Peter, every customer that I've signed up in the last 9 months has increased their telco spend by 20 to 30%. With each opportunity. It's never come down to, you've got to be reasonable and competitive, but there's room there to make margin and look after your customer to get that loyalty. People
will pay for the value they see.
That's right. Yeah.
Right. And so if they go in and all you're doing is providing a quote on a phone system, or even a hosted PABX or SIP lines is a really good example, right? Like there's very little ability for you to add value there.
Yeah.
Whereas as we've been talking about, and as you just said, if we can go in and reframe that conversation and start going, okay, let's take a step back. Let's talk about what pain points you have. Are you worried about this? What about redundancy? How are you working with your staff? And start solving those problems. Then again, it's that consultative sell. Suddenly you've elevated yourself from, why did the other guy just want to throw me a quote? Why aren't they asking me these problems? How are they, do they care about my business? Are they invested? Do they want to bring me on a journey, or do they just want to sell me a phone system? And so I think you're right. Like if, you're certainly not charging, you're charging more because you're providing more in that.
Correct.
And a whole holistic. And end customers, they don't really care, right? They don't really want to know about their phone systems, right? They just want to have productive systems that work, and they know they can go to someone if it's not working. And most businesses are very happy to pay, particularly on a per user basis, which is another really powerful part of this. There's no big CapEx changes every 3 years when, they're banging the door. I remember my business when the phone guy turned up, I'm like, weren't you just here a few months ago? Like, no, it was 2 years ago. We're going to do it all again.
Yep.
So
That's
so
right.
what we're
They
saying
don't have
here
time
is,
for that. They're running a business.
sorry, mate.
They're trying to run a business. They don't have time for that.
Mate, absolutely. You're 100% right. And so what we're saying here is that if we can talk about these types of conversations, we able to deliver increased margin and revenue, which again, as sellers, that's what we're very much about.